Okay, so today we have a demonstration by Bryan Blankenship about how to build a frame for a works on paper. So this is going to be good for photography, for printmaking, for drawing, for anything that you want to put under glass. And the way we're going to be building this frame is for something that's going to float in the back of the frame away from the glass in a shadow box effect. Okay, so Bryan's going to start by making this from scratch by using lumber that he's purchased from Home Depot called Claymark, sorry, yeah. Called Claymark. And he's going to cut it down to the, he's going to cut essentially what's called a rabbet.
Yeah.
So it's going to be the part of the frame that holds the glass.
Yeah. Okay, so we have our 1x4 again to start with, Claymark, premium pine. So the first thing we're going to do, this frame is going to actually be 1 3/4 deep off of the wall. So the first thing we're going to do is set the saw at 1 3/4 inches. Okay. Lock this fence down. I'm going to drop the blade back down. Again, where the teeth are just above the surface of the wood. Going to find my convex edge, which is this side against the fence again. Lock it down. So now we have our board that's 3/4 inch thick by 1 3/4 inches wide. And now we're, as Beth said, we're going to cut a rabbet out of this piece of wood. So the first measurement we want to find here is we're going to do, the first cut is 5/16, which will be, what I like to do is always just kind of sketch this. Can you, let me see if I can get in with the camera. I like to sketch that cut. Of course, these are not the measurements yet. I'll do that with the saw. But just so I can kind of get an idea, if you can see the end of the board here where I've sketched the cut that we're going to make. So we're going to cut this section right here out. That's going to take that section out. So we're going to do 5/16. One, two. Okay, so we've got our 5/16 for this spacing, but now we have, because we're going to cut this out, we have to adjust for this top cut right here on the board, which goes down 1/4 inch. So what we want to do is, now as we set the depth, and the way I do this, I generally just set the piece of wood in here, and I know I'm standing in front of the camera, and I crank the blade up to that, just maybe a little bit below that, because we can always, what we'll do is we'll turn it on its side and then we'll finish that cut and get it exactly 1/4 inch. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this edge through to get our 5/16 side over here. Yeah. So now you can see we have our 5/16 right here. And then we'll come back and cut on this side to make this a 1/4 of an inch up here. This way you can see what I'm doing is I'm measuring where the teeth are going to cut right up into that groove. You don't want it to go too far and cut up into this top piece of the wood that you're saving. So we're going to make sure the teeth are cutting right there. And then we're going to come back and set the fence at 1/4 inch. So it's very important not to get confused. And if you have to, when you're first starting to learn to do this, if you have to, just make a little X or a mark on the side that you know is your 5/16. And then this is going to be the 1/4 inch up here. So I'll know not to cut through this piece right here. So what I'm going to do is I'll put the board in this way because we're going to cut down this side right here. So now you can see this piece falls out, and what we're left with is basically an L shape. This is the frame as it would sit against the wall. This is the front of the frame. This is the side. So we have this left over, which we will use to make our spacer for the glass.
So the spacer is going to be a 1/2 inch wide, and that will hold the glass away from the actual piece, and it will give us ample room. And this is something that's important for works on paper. Paper should never touch the glass.
So we'll put this aside. We'll take the spacer piece now. I'm going to reset the saw at 1/2 inch. Drop the saw blade down. Always, again, finding my convex side, which this is the convex side right here. And so you have your 1/2 inch spacer, and this will be determined by what you're framing and how many because in some instances you may want to have like a shadow box where you have 2 different layers. So you're going to think about those things. Those are going to be determined by what it is you're framing. And you still have some left, so if you decide that this size doesn't work for you, you still have leftovers here. So now we have the 1/2 inch spacer. So this now, if you remember, this is the top of our frame. The glass will sit nested underneath this edge right here. This is the outside of the frame. So, and then our spacer will be in below the glass, and then you'll have your backing board of the artwork, whether it's a photograph or painting on paper, print, whatever that is. But these are, as Beth said earlier, these are mostly for something you want to float behind glass to protect it, something with a delicate surface.
Or matted.
Or matted.
Yeah, so it's we're going to be doing a floating frame, but it could easily be a matted piece.
Yeah.
And if it's a matted piece, then you don't need the spacers because the mat will keep the artwork away from the glass.
Yeah. Okay. So first we're going to take our top with the outside edge against the fence, always keeping the outside edge against the fence. We're going to bring it in, set our saw back in this direction on a 45. I'm going to pull this down and make my first miter cut on that end. So now I have my first miter cut. And so this one is 10 5/8 by 8 5/8. So I just noticed that this piece of wood has some crud right here on the end where I've cut. Best thing to do in that situation, you could go in and fill that with wood filler and stuff, but that's a lot of work, and you've got extra wood here when you're making this frame. If it were a case where you didn't have extra lumber, you might want to go back and fill that and stuff. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and cut that off and start over with that miter, just to get rid of that cruddy piece. And so now you can see we have a nice clean end there. Okay. So the same as the floating frame for the canvas, these measurements, instead of being on the outside like the canvas stretchers, we're going to make the measurements on the inside right here on this point.
No,
or
right.
Actually right
there,
here, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The lower line right here as opposed to this one.
Because that's the actual shape that this is going to be.
Yeah.
That interior line, not the outer edge, the exterior part of it, but the interior line.
So essentially the glass will be the same size as the artwork.
Right.
Okay. Okay, so on this, from this point right here, the lower line right here, not the top here. So essentially if you think of the piece of glass that fits in here, will be the same size as the backing board, which holds the artwork, or the piece of artwork itself could be that size. So what we're going to do is we're going to measure again 10 5/8. So I'm going to set this at 1 inch on that line. So I'm going to come down to 11 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5/8. So I've got my mark right here. Get a little piece here that I can use to make this mark. And this gets pretty tedious because we have so little lumber here to work with. So you can see my mark there, which makes this what we hope is 10 5/8. I'm going to double check that before I cut it. 11 5/8. Because I'm adding that inch on the end there. So we're good to go on that. So then I can just put this right against the fence. As I said, always keeping the outside of the frame against the fence. Okay, so we've got our first piece of that frame. I'm going to write on the inside 10 5/8. So I'll put that over there. Now I have to go back and cut my miter again. Okay, so again, I can use this one as a template, making sure those are perfectly lined up. Make my mark. (10 5/8). So now we have both of our 10 5/8 inch pieces. I'll put those together. You can see they're exactly the same size. So I'll put those aside. Cut my miter back to the right direction. And so now the next one is 8 5/8. So I'm going to again put my 1-inch mark right there. Come down to 9, 2, 3, 4, 5/8. Double check that measurement. That's correct. I've made my mark now for 8 5/8. Make my miter back again. Made my mark using that as a template. Going to double check it real quick just to make sure that that is 9 5/8 from the 1-inch mark, which makes it 8 5/8. So everything's cut there for those 4 pieces to be assembled. I'll start with the longer piece. Again, these are pieces that are very similar in size. So the longer piece on the top, the shorter piece on the bottom. Do the glue just like I did with the other 2, covering the whole surface. Now, if you have the time and the patience, and we do have the clamps here, if you wanted to, you could put these in a frame clamp and just glue them and let them dry in the frame clamp. Then you wouldn't have to worry with trying to put these brad nails in, because as you can see right here, we have not a whole lot of territory to nail into. So you have to practice a little bit with the nail gun. If you haven't practiced a little bit, you probably should come in and do that and shoot a few nails, because if you miss by just a fraction of an inch, that nail can shoot out and damage your wood, and so you want to kind of be prepared for that by doing a little bit of practice. So I'm going to take my 2 surfaces that I've put glue on here. I've changed to a nail gun with 5/8 inch brads in it as opposed to the 1.5. If we tried to shoot 1.5 inch nails into that small amount of wood, it probably would blow the wood up. And so the 5/8 will still hold it because it's a very light, small frame. And again, like I said earlier, all the brads are really doing or is holding it together while the glue dries. So what they're doing in this instance is serving as a frame clamp, essentially. So I'm going to put these together. Okay. Once again, taking the wet paper towel, or damp paper towel, you don't want it to be too wet, and getting all the glue off. Set that aside. I'll get my other longer piece, shorter piece, and repeat the glue. Wiping the glue off again. And now we have our two pieces. So again, we'll put glue on all of the surface. It's going to be glued together, both sides. I've switched back to the 5/8 inch brads because of the delicate nature of the frame to be put together. So I'm going to hold this first corner together.
That's great.
And so that one's together. Gonna go back. And you'll notice on some of these corners sometimes, this one has a little bit of a edge to the thing. Once you fill that with a little bit of wood filler and then sand it, it'll sand down and you'll be good to go. Sometimes you have little inconsistencies like that. Hopefully not too many.
And now the final part of this is to cut the spacers to go inside. And this is going to be a horizontal image. So we're going to cut the spacers with the long sides at the top and the bottom. And then the short sides would be on the verticals. So, so remember, the smaller dimensions are going to have the shorter spacer bars.
We're looking at the frame from the back side because this is where we're going to drop the spacers in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the two spacers that go on the top and the bottom, the longest, and then the other two will fit in between those. So what we're going to do is I'll lay this down, and I've got my spacer piece right here, just like we did with the support bar or the crossbar in the stretcher frame. I'm going to come in and hold that right there, and I'm going to make a little mark that's going to be the length that we cut that. What I'll do a lot of times with this, if the frame is made really well, these both should be exactly the same size. So what I can do is I can look at this and see that it is exactly the same. So when I have to go to the miter saw, I know that I can cut this one, take my pencil with me, and then cut another one exactly the same, so I don't have to keep making trips back and forth. So I'll go to the miter saw now and cut this. And again, I can just lay this down. Make my mark. And then cut the second one. So now I'll bring these back, and they may have been cut a little bit heavy, as I said earlier, or a little bit long, just because it's easier to go back and trim them down than if you cut them too short, and then you'll have to come in and cut new ones because they may be too loose. So this one is really too tight to fit in there. I'll try this one and see it's too tight too, and it's too tight there. So what I'll do is I'll take both of them back to the saw. And as you can see that now, they fit snugly in the corners there. So all we have left to do now is to cut the two pieces that fit in between those. And what those will do is they'll act as columns to hold those up. So when you put the work of art in there, those won't fall down take these back out, and I will hold that one there, and I'll lay that one in where it just sits at an angle a little bit. Well, I had it. Hold this one. So what that does is that allows me to put that there. So I get my mark right there. What I'll do is I'll go ahead and cut this one, and since I have a lot of wood, I'll take the chance. If it doesn't work, we'll come back and cut another one. I've got these two that I've cut. We're going to drop them in, and we can see that they fit just right in there.
Perfect.
Perfect. So you drop those in. First, you'd put your piece of glass in, drop those spacers in, and then put your backing board in. And what they do is they create that half-inch space between the artwork and the glass.
Great. Thank you so much, Bryan.
Mm-hmm.
It's been great.